So, Halloween 2018 was like really, really fantastic. And when I started this project, I kind of just assumed that Halloween Kills would be too. Really hedged my bets there on being able to close out the season on a great movie. I got out the fancy skeleton jacket and everything. Okay, so listen, I enjoyed Halloween Kills. I paid for my ticket, I saw the movie, I had a good time, and I don't regret going. But I do understand the negative reviews. Halloween Kills is well put together. It's got some great performances, it's got some great set pieces, but as an overall package, it's quite mixed. The follow-up to the aforementioned exceptional 2018 Halloween film, which in itself was a sequel to the 1978 original retconning all other films, Halloween Kills follows that film's seemingly definitive ending, where Michael was defeated through the power of the Strode women coming together to overcome generational trauma, leaving Myers in Laurie's burning house after a final stare down which saw the power dynamics of the two shift, with Laurie using Michael's own tricks against him, like disappearing after falling from the balcony, emerging from the shadows to attack him just as he had once done, and her daughter stabbing him with his own knife, and in the final moments, Laurie towers over him as he stands staring and trapped in her burning safe room before the women leave and Laurie says her final goodbye to her would-be killer. Perfect. The phenomenal ending this series has always deserved. One that did away with all the Tatton nonsense, all the crappy familial revelations, all the weird occult stuff, and all the bad characterizations and reality show diversions to deliver a tight, meaningful story about PTSD and family that breathed new life into beloved screen icons and wrapped it all up in a slick slasher package. Except, of course, that wasn't the ending. As definitive as that finale might have seemed, Halloween is an IP that is ripe for profit, and before the release of that movie, a trilogy had already been somewhat planned, and after the much warranted success of the film both critically and commercially, development of the sequel began before the month was even over. And so Halloween Kills begins with the flames that engulfed our defeated killer being put out and Michael emerging from the home in an admittedly killer shot, pun absolutely intended, to carry on with his kill spree once more. Now, just before I get into this film a bit more, I want to say I hope you don't mind seeing my handsome skeleton face a bit more during this one, as with it being a brand new release, the only thing I really have to cut to is trailers. And I don't want to just repeat them too often, but the last thing I want is for the final episode of this massive 31-day project to fall at the hurdle of being pulled for copyright reasons, so I gotta play it safe on this one. I hope you'll forgive me. Also, don't worry about me spoiling stuff on this one. I realise that this is a totally new film and a lot of people might be coming to this video still not having seen it but wanting to, so I'm just going to give a general setup and cover a general plot synopsis without giving away any major developments or the ending. Anyway, yeah, Halloween Kills follows the immediate events of Halloween 2018. Laurie is bleeding from wounds and needs medical attention but is hanging on. Her daughter and granddaughter hitch a ride with her to the hospital while Laurie's house burns down with Mr. Myers in it. However, while en route to the hospital, the three witness fire engines heading to Laurie's home, and as Laurie screams "let it burn," the fire brigade arrive at the home, and upon going inside to look for survivors, they accidentally free Michael from the confinement of Laurie's safe room. He emerges from the home with one of my favourite mask designs in the series, by the way, with some of the rubber on the side of his face burned and melted from the flames. Looks super cool. And then he kills a lot of people immediately, namely the fire brigade there to save him, and the film carries on from there. However, you may be surprised to know that is not how the film opens. Instead, we open with the young Cameron, the cheating boyfriend from the first movie who went to a Halloween party in a couple's costume with Laurie's granddaughter Allison. Cameron is heading home from the party alone and still in costume when he comes across one of Michael's wounded victims, Deputy Frank Hawkins, and tries to help him. And then we flash back to a younger Hawkins at a very specific period of time and place. Haddonfield, 1978. Now, to quickly interject with some thoughts here, I was really excited to see that little date come up on the screen, and the fully realised late 70s Haddonfield looked exactly like it did when it was first filmed 40 years ago. It's really incredible that they were able to pull this off. Everything from the lighting, to the costumes, to the backdrops, it all emulated the 1978 film's aesthetic so much it was almost uncanny. It was like somehow someone had shot that movie's locations in that period of time, but with all the sheen that comes with the modernised cameras and hundreds of millions of dollars in budget that you get from today's big horror films. It was super cool to see such a familiar setting from this new perspective, and I was extremely excited to see why we were here and what they were going to do with it. However, while the production values are very cool, this unfortunately highlighted one of Halloween Kills' biggest problems. There's simply too much going on in it. As fun as this flashback sequence is, we simply spend too much time here, and the revelations and new information we come to from its inclusion do not justify its existence. We visit this time period more than once, and the events that transpired during this time offer us insight into the motivations and actions of several characters, but never in a way that's satisfying or feels necessary, and often in a way that seems to halt the story we're already experiencing. The novelty pretty quickly wears off, and between this, the main plot, and several subplot threads, the film feels a little scattered. I will say though, that there was one thing in these flashback sequences that made my jaw absolutely hit the floor. Very, very minor spoilers here, I suppose, as it doesn't have any real impact on the plot, but I think probably was intended as a surprise. So if you're bothered about that, skip to this time code to jump back to me carrying on with the general plot summary. But I have to say, the character Dr. Loomis, played by the late great Donald Pleasance, reappears in this sequence, and I never ever talk in movies, but when he came up on screen, I couldn't help myself but to turn to my partner and whisper, how the fuck have they done that? He looks amazing. I couldn't believe it. For a moment I thought they must have used some CG wizardry to reincorporate lost footage of Pleasance himself, but having now looked up how they pulled this off, it's just a look-alike in makeup and a sound-alike dubbing in the voice. Holy shit does the illusion work though. Absolutely incredible stuff. Hats off to the team on that one. I also personally feel like this is a great deal less ghoulish than this trend of having actors' likenesses portrayed entirely in CG. You know, there's an actual actor there, it's more like a recasting of a character rather than this weird practice of digitizing the image of dead people over CG puppets to do your bidding with. That's maybe just me though, and that's a whole different discussion maybe for another video. To get back to Halloween Kills, when we come back to modern times, the main plot follows Michael once again on a killing spree, and the Strode women are once again out to stop him, or at least two of them are, because Laurie, the best Strode, who has the most history with the villain and the most compelling relationship to him, is, in one of the film's more baffling decisions, relegated to sitting around in a hospital bed for most of the film's runtime, generally only being cut to so that she can deliver exposition-heavy dialogue to a fellow patient that waxes poetically about the film's themes and Michael's motivations, and I'm not opposed to having Laurie be sidelined if it felt like there was strong thematic reasoning for it, like if this film was sort of a passing of the final girl torch to the younger Allison perhaps, and Laurie took on more of a remote mentoring role, but it's just disappointing. They do almost nothing with her the whole movie. I mean, good for Jamie Lee Curtis for sure. This must have been a real chill time for her, and don't get me wrong, she's not phoning it in or anything. All of her dialogue is delivered with a real emotional weight and gravitas, even if some of it is a little on the nose, but it's hardly a satisfying use of the character. In Laurie's absence though, gunning for Michael is this time an angry vigilante mob. A major part of the plotline in this one is that news gets out of Michael Myers' current escape and rampage, and this reaches a lot of the child survivors from that 1978 attack, including a very much in need of therapy and probably a PTSD diagnosis, Tommy Doyle, the young kid that Laurie once babysat who was present during Michael's first attack on her, here played by Anthony Michael Hall. Sorry Paul Rudd fans. On hearing the news, Tommy immediately begins to incite a mob of people to hunt the man down, taking leadership over this newly riled up bunch. This, I think, has been a pretty divisive aspect of the movie, but I actually really like it. Don't get me wrong, it has its flaws. There's a little too much suspension of disbelief asked of some of their actions, their chosen chant is a little annoying and corny, and their thematic ideas are delivered in a very on-the-nose manner. I shit you not, there's a scene where a character pretty much turns to the camera and is like, "Perhaps we are the real monsters," or something very similar, and it is as eye-rolling and groan-worthy as it sounds. This film did not place much confidence in its audience's intelligence. Like, yeah, I think we got that, mate. But on the other hand, it gives it a new and refreshing dynamic to the proceedings that sets it apart from other slasher and Halloween films. You'll recall in my Halloween 4 video that I lamented the lack of any meaning or interesting conflict present from the introduction of the vigilante mob. At the time I wrote that video, this film wasn't even out yet, but it's kind of surreal how much of it feels like a direct response to those criticisms. The mob this time round don't just kind of have one compelling moment that's never explored again like they did in Halloween 4, they're almost the whole film's central conceit this time. The introduction of their dynamic gives the film a ton of new problems and conflicts to work with, and although yes, the ideas surrounding their introduction are explored with all the subtlety of a hammer in the face, they are at least something thematic to take away from this film that is discussed and explored as opposed to just appearing and then kind of ignored as the mob once was in Halloween 4. That film didn't seem to have any stance on them, whereas this film makes the purpose of their inclusion far clearer. Anyway, without getting too much into spoilers, that's the general gist of the film. There's a few different plot threads going, the revelations of the flashbacks to 1978, the angry mob, Laurie in the hospital bed, her daughter and granddaughter's relationship with others, the older of the two, Karen, has a lot of conflict with Tommy for example, and the younger, Allison, is reunited in her hunt for Michael with cheating boyfriend Tommy, and of course, there's the general thread of the Strodes in particular wanting Michael dead, and Michael going around and killing people with a much greater focus on the brutality and violence of it, which on its own also introduces a bunch of new characters, sometimes part of the angry mob, sometimes separate from the mob, but they're all briefly explored before they have their own encounters with the stabby fella. Most of those people are uninteresting and forgettable, but shout out to Big John and Little John, the couple now living at the old Myers household, as being a highlight. Those guys are cool, really likeable, charismatic, and share a great deal of chemistry. Really enjoyed the dynamic of whenever those two were on screen. And you know, generally speaking, that's Halloween Kills. I probably sound pretty negative on it for the most part, but there is actually a lot of stuff I like here. Michael Myers feels like a really relentless force in this one. With a lot more characters scattered around, there's a lot more time for him to flex his ferocity, and he's basically like the Terminator meets Jason Voorhees in this one. As brutal as the latter and as unstoppable as the former. It's probably the most fierce we've ever seen the character, and while some of that comes at the expense of tension, there's still something to be said for just how much of a truly intense force of nature he feels this time around. As already mentioned, I don't hate the angry mob stuff as much as a lot of other people. It could have been better executed, sure, but it's got something to say, and it's a bit of a change of pace from the general skulking and stalking that permeates not just Halloween, but to an extent, every other slasher movie. It gives the film a unique identity. Like, you can always refer to this one as the one about the mob, rather than just, you know, the other one that's also about Michael. It also can get genuinely emotional at times. There's a sequence in this film where I really felt a lot of empathy for what was happening on screen. It was legitimately sad, and more so than any other slasher films, there's a bit more of a focus on the victims of violence and the people left behind. It's not a huge focus per se, but for example, Allison's father, who died at the end of the previous movie, is mentioned and mourned on multiple occasions throughout this film, and that felt strangely refreshing. So many slashers, including some of my favourites, often forget about characters the second they die. I mean, look at the first Scream, which I love. A major character's sister dies in that movie, and you could honestly forget they were even related because she's just never mentioned again. On the subject of victims as well, this feels like the first film in the series that actively acknowledges that those with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violence and not the perpetrators. As much as I adore Halloween 1978 and 2018, they really rely on the overplayed trope of escaped mental patient. But this film seems to make a concerted effort to distance Michael from the idea of mental illness by, for the first time, offering a sympathetic mentally ill character in vast contrast with his violence. It almost feels like the film is kind of saying like, yeah, Michael spent time in institutions for the mentally ill, but that's more or less because no one knew where to put him. His problem isn't that he's mentally ill, it's that he's just evil. And when another character who spent time in the same institution as Michael gets a fair amount of screen time, the film does well to contrast the two, and I actually think it has a lot to say about how we as a society perceive the mentally ill, as there are a lot of people in this film who wrongly assume this new mentally ill character to be equally dangerous and capable of the same horrendous acts as Michael is. So look, it really does have a lot going for it, and it is a fun night out. It's just, here's the thing with Halloween Kills. It's busy. While the previous film felt extremely streamlined, tight and focused, Kills has a lot of big ideas but not really enough time to explore all of them, and ends up a loose connection of a bunch of narrative threads that have some good moments and set pieces in them, but ultimately the sum of their parts wind up not really leading to much and feeling scattered. So much of what are listed as positives aren't persistent. They're just moments of positivity in otherwise unfocused clutter. And here's the other thing with Halloween Kills. It's not scary. And granted, obviously, I'm someone who watches a fair amount of horror. The 31 back-to-back videos on the subject this and last year might have gave you that impression. So I'm maybe a little harder to scare than most. I don't actually think that's the case, but you know, I'm willing to concede that's a possible factor that's colouring my perception here. But having said that, even when I'm personally not scared of a film, I can recognise when it is scary, if that makes sense. I've watched the original 1978 Halloween so many times now that it has absolutely zero effect on me. But I still can recognise when it crafts tension. I can sense when something is suspenseful and scratching at those senses that make your hair stand on end. Halloween Kills simply does not do this. It makes no attempt to be suspenseful. Violent and dealing with unpleasant subject matter, sure, but never in a way that seems to make any significant effort to scare you. And that's not even just me saying that. The director has pretty much kind of admitted that was the intention. When promoting the film's release, David Gordon Green went on the Evolution of Horror podcast to talk about the film. In his interview, he said that Halloween Kills isn't so much about tension building this time, it's more about aggression. And he went on to say how in horror, it's really about surprise or suspense, and that they chose to go more with surprise in this one. And like, that's cool, that's fine or whatever, but is that Halloween? Granted, you don't need to stay handcuffed to the ideas and mood of the original film, and it does give us the far more violent and brutal Michael, which in its own way is kind of a highlight, as I've already mentioned, but it does strike me as an odd decision when you consciously chose to tie yourself to that film specifically, willingly creating a narrative that ignored all other entries in the series, put that one on a pedestal, and went, this is the one that counts. The last film found a nice balance between suspense and surprise. It had a lot of brutal gore that punctuated its runtime, but it also had a great deal of drawn out tension. To actively go for surprise and aggression in your film feels at odds with the premise you're building upon. They certainly achieve what they set out to do, there's no denying that here, but it makes for a Michael Myers that feels more like Jason Voorhees with his focus on jumping out for cool and furious graphic kills and a high body count, and it creates a film that lacks any real degree of tension or suspense. Now granted, this is probably coming off really negative, but legitimately, I'm not actually super down on this one as a lot of people are. It's a bit disappointing when narratively following what I consider to be two exceptional movies, but it's still by far one of the better Halloween sequels in the grand scheme of things, and probably still the third, maybe fourth best Halloween movie overall in my opinion. I'd say go see it. You might roll your eyes at a couple of points, and you're very unlikely to be scared by it, and it's definitely not going to blow your socks off or anything, but it's a fun movie and still a good way to spend a Friday night at the cinemas. You'll definitely like it if you're a fan of the Friday the 13th movies, and you'll probably like it if you're a fan of Halloween. A recommendation for sure, just not a completely glowing one. And that, my friends, is our final film covered. Our last video done, and this marks the end of another Wholesome Halloween season. Not quite the massive hurrah of a movie I had hoped to end it on, but it's not about the destination, it's the journey. and I hope you've enjoyed going on this journey with me as much as I've enjoyed taking you. But before I go, I still have a lot to say, and though I may ramble on now for quite a bit, I hope you can all bear with me and hear what I have to say. And my God, do I hope we don't have technical issues with the sound for this again, because this is coming at the very end of a long recording day, and this part especially really isn't something I want to have to record twice. Unfortunately, friends, I have some potentially bad news. At this point in time, I do not know if there'll be another Wholesome Halloween next year. I want there to be. I especially like the idea of ending on a trilogy, but I hope you'll forgive me if there isn't, as these things are a huge undertaking, and that's been especially true this year. The videos this season have at their lowest sat around the 4,000 word mark, and at their highest gone over the 6,000 threshold. Collectively over the past couple of months, I have wrote something between 124,000 words and 186,000 words. I haven't added up the word count totals, but I estimate that I'm probably somewhere in the 150k to 160k area. The minimum length of text required to be considered to be a novel is only 50,000 words. I have wrote the equivalent of 3 novels in as many months. And I'm not saying this to humble brag, I just want to stress that even when starting months early to get on top of things, that this has been a great deal of work, and I'm just not sure I have the capacity to do it again. And that's just the writing. That's before you even get into things like obviously the presenting, the makeup, data transfers, the recording, the editing, which probably takes up nearly as much time, if not sometimes more than the writing. And then on top of that, there's all the little bits you don't think about, like thumbnails and title animations and tagging and sharing the videos on social media that seem like tiny little things, but add up when you're doing them all together, especially when you're doing it 31 times. Add to that, this year there's been a huge hurdle of massive technical issues you guys haven't seen or known about that have written off entire weekends of work and pushed me back even further off schedule than just the general falling behind that would naturally occur when you're trying to write around 5,000 words a day every day. And the other thing that's really making me consider not doing this again is it's not just putting work on me. I must stress that Wholesome Halloween is not a one-man show. It would literally be impossible to do as one. As much as I write and present everything and edit videos wherever I can, there is literally just too much work here for one person. Much like last year, I really need to give a huge thank you to my friend Jamie, who longtime viewers of the channel will know as the second voice of Video Game Movie Madness back when we did those video podcasts before the Pokemon series came along and absolutely destroyed us with copyright bollocks, and who patrons will know as Pangerus on the Patreon Discord. Last year I mentioned that Jamie did a lot of editing on the videos, but this year he's done even more than the already astronomical amount of work he did last year. With technical issues meaning we had to reshoot weekends multiple times, that meant I lost a lot of planned writing time, which put us well behind schedule, and being the absolute star that he is, he took on even more of the videos. I know at the time of this recording we still have a bunch to edit, and now that all of the writing and recording is out of the way, I'll be jumping back on that to help him. But I need you to understand that as of this moment right now, we have 25 edits done, and I have done 3 of them. I have only edited Jason X, Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, and Jamie has done every other single episode so far. Bless the lad, he had to come up with visuals for my little Superman shtick in Scream 3 because I thought I'd be editing that video, and I can only assume he sat down, saw my dialogue and went, what the fuck is this? Anyways, so far he's still going, and we'll probably end up doing maybe 25 or 26 of these 31 edits when all is said and done. He's an absolute king, and I demand you all thank him profusely in the comments, because without him, this would have fallen at the first hurdle. You literally simply would not be hearing these words right now. His input on this thing cannot be overstated. Also, a huge thanks to my partner who has helped me with my makeup this year. Whenever the makeup has looked noticeably better, I guarantee that's been one of the days she did it. And she also did the amazing artwork I used to promote the announcement video, has sat through countless weekends of recordings, operating the teleprompter for me when Jamie wasn't available to, and also just being a general shoulder to have the occasional mental breakdown into whenever technical issues just absolutely destroyed my morale, and overall just being an absolute rock and a treasure who has never once complained about all the free time I stole from us to do this project that absolutely no one in the world was forcing me to do. It would mean the world to me if you could all follow their art page on Instagram, link in the description, as plugging that is the least thanks I could give for being such an important part in this whole process. Once again, just as with Jamie, without them, this could not have happened. But also, with all the issues, with the higher word counts, and with my full-time employment being busier than ever, even being up from the 2-person team of last year to the 3-person team of this year, this has been so much harder to do this time than the already extremely difficult task of putting out last year's efforts. I'm conscious of the fact that as much as it's a lot of work for me, it's also a lot of work for 2 others who are essentially grafting their asses off just to help me bring something to life. Also while juggling full-time employment themselves, and as much as I love their support and they both enjoy Wholesome Halloween as much as I do, I'd be foolish to suggest that it isn't a lot of stressful work. Even if I started November 1st straight off the bat and just wrote 1 a week, because there's 31 videos to this thing, that would still take over half the year, and immediately there'd be a frantic edit race as we'd have to edit more than 1 a week consistently after that to have them ready for October, as there literally isn't enough weeks in the year. And that's obviously not even including things like recording time and thumbnails and all that jazz, or even the fact that I'm presumably going to want to make other videos as well that are going to be equally demanding of my time. Which, by the way, don't think this is some big channel goodbye or anything. Please do stick around for other stuff. I have a lot of cool ideas I'm planning and I think you're going to enjoy a lot of them. It's just that it might be that Wholesome Halloween 3 isn't one of them. We are all genuinely very keen to do a Wholesome Halloween 3. I even have a theme picked out and a potential film list that I'll not be sharing with you now in case it does go ahead, but whether that happens or not is still very much up in the air. We don't know how much other work we're going to have on a year from now. And while there is always the low-key hope that my channel will blow up at some point and give me more financial freedom to kind of focus more on it and thus make this whole process a lot less stressful and have this become a far more achievable yearly tradition, I certainly don't expect it to ever happen, so I can't really count on that. And that's okay, honestly, because even if this is the last one, and while it would suck that real life has to interfere and stop this thing we all really truly care about, it has genuinely been an honour and a privilege to share this love and celebration of movies with you all on such a grand scale. Your comments, your appreciation, and your like-minded passion and enthusiasm fills me with a genuinely unmatchable feeling of joy. And the idea that my channel, even as small as it is, has thousands of people tune in every day to just collectively love the medium of storytelling is humbling. So I hope I haven't went on too long with all of this, but before I finish for the year, I want to give one final thank you. Not to anyone who has worked on this, but to all of you, this small but wonderful community who truly make Wholesome Halloween as special as it is. Without you, this is just a weird autistic dude in skeleton makeup rambling incessantly to a camera, but with you, that weirdo feels a little bit special. And I truly, truly thank you for that. And with that, I'm done for the day. I'm not going to do my general plug sign off. You all know the gist. You know where the likes and comments are. You know I've got a Patreon and you know where the subscribe button is. All I want to say is, I've been Dan Drambles. You've been watching Wholesome Halloween 2/a season. And maybe I'll see you again someday as a skeleton boy that I am now. Maybe not. But until that time may come, please have a wondrous, happy, safe, and above all else, I hope wholesome Halloween.